Story 1 Death Box. This happened a few months ago when I was in my second year of junior high school. Hanging on the wall at the back of our classroom, there was a suggestion box. It was put there by the teacher, Mrs. Solomon. If any students had ideas for improvements that could be made, we were supposed to write our opinions down in a letter and put it in the suggestion box. Then Mrs. Solomon would read the letters and consider our proposals. One morning, when we came to class, someone had crossed out the suggestion part of the sign and written death there instead. The death box caused a bit of a stir in the classroom. Some students thought it was funny, but others were a little disturbed by it. There were rumors that two boys named Derek and Jamal did it as a prank. They were always causing mischief and disrupting class. However, when the teacher confronted them about it, both of them denied it. Afterwards, I quietly asked them if they really had done it. They still claimed they knew nothing about it. In the end, the teacher couldn't figure out who the culprit was, and the matter was dropped. A few days later, Derek was found hanging by the neck in the classroom after school. He was dead. There was a note in the death box that read, "Sorry for annoying everyone in class." A few days after Derek's funeral, Jamal was also found hanging by the neck in the classroom. In the death box, there was another note that read, "Sorry for annoying everyone in class." We were all shocked. None of us could understand why two of our classmates would suddenly commit suicide. It was very disturbing. After that, when we came to school, the classroom seemed very creepy. All we could think about was what had occurred there. Soon after that, I transferred to a new school. I had to get used to the new classroom and try and make a new group of friends. One day, when I got home after school and turned on the TV, I saw a breaking news report. It was about my previous school. Scrolling across the bottom of the screen, I saw the headline, "Teacher Suicide." The news anchor was saying the teacher who committed suicide was a homeroom teacher of the two boys who were killed. She left behind a suicide note that read, "I always wanted to know what it would feel like to kill. Sorry for all the fuss." I stared at the screen in disbelief. According to the news report, Derek and Jamal had not committed suicide after all. They were murdered by our teacher, Mrs. Solomon, and then she committed suicide. It was all too much to take in and very hard to believe. Sure, sometimes Mrs. Solomon would scold the students for misbehaving, but she was usually a kind and gentle woman. Why would she do all this? I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I had misbehaved just as much as Derek or Jamal. If I had not been transferred to a different school, perhaps I would have been next. Just then, I heard the sound of the front door opening. My mother was home from work. She came into the room carrying an envelope in her hand. "There was a letter for you," she said. "Why are you so pale? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer her. Instead, I took the letter and examined it. The envelope was blank. There was no address written on it. I opened it and found a note inside, written in big red letters. It read, "Don't think you can escape. 15 days have passed since then, but I'm still afraid to set foot outside my front door. Story 2 Kaimuki House. There is an infamous haunted house in Honolulu, Hawaii that the locals call Kaimuki House. Some people call it Hawaii's Amityville Horror. In the summer of 1942, the house was occupied by a single mother and her 3 children. One night, the police were called to her house. They found a hysterical woman in the front yard screaming, "She's trying to kill my children." When they entered the house, the police officers stumbled onto a scene that they would never forget. The 3 children were being thrown around the room by an invisible force. The officers watched for over an hour, unable to do anything, as the children were beaten and strangled by the unseen entity. The incident was on the front page of the local newspaper headlines for several days. Years later, 3 girls were sharing the house. One night, they started to hear strange noises. It sounded like someone was moving around and talking. One of the girls felt an invisible hand on her arm. They called the police. When an officer arrived, he found the 3 girls standing outside the house with a look of sheer terror on their faces. The girls decided to go and stay with one of their mothers, and the policeman decided to follow them to make sure nothing happened. However, on the way, the The police officer saw the girl's car pull over into a parking lot. The girl in the front seat was struggling with something invisible that was trying to strangle her. When the policeman jumped out of his car and tried to rescue the girls, he felt a strong, calloused hand grab his arm and twist it. Suddenly, the door of the vehicle flew open and the girl was thrown out onto the road. She was clawing at her throat as if someone was choking her. They were unable to do anything to stop the attack and were forced to watch as the woman was strangled to death. In 1977, a Japanese couple moved into the haunted house in Kaimuki. They didn't know anything about its history. On their first night in the place, the wife woke up at midnight because the bedroom was very cold. When she looked around, she was horrified to see a ghostly white figure floating in midair. It was a woman with no arms or legs. When the wife tried to wake her husband, the figure disappeared. The next day, the couple were so disturbed by the apparition that they contacted a priest. He advised them to make offerings of bread and water to the spirit every night. He said it was a Kasha, a Japanese demon, caused by some horrible murders that had occurred in the house years before. After repeating the ceremony every night for a week, the couple never saw the horrific spirit in the house again. These stories are just the tip of the iceberg. They say the cause of the haunting was a series of terrible murders. Many years ago, a Japanese immigrant lived in a house with his wife and 2 children. Apparently, the husband killed his wife, his son, and his daughter. He chopped up the bodies and hid them on the property. The police discovered the corpses of the wife and son buried in the garden, but the daughter's body was never found. They say her corpse is still hidden somewhere in the house. After that, the house was abandoned for many years. Later, there were 2 women who lived in the house. One of the women fell in love with a man. There was some type of love triangle, and they say the man was driven mad by jealousy. He murdered both of the women and then committed suicide in the house. The bodies of the 3 people were found inside the home after a few days. It is believed that these horrible murders created a Kasha, a Japanese demon created by a grudge or extreme anger after a shocking murder. Today, villagers still tell stories of the terrifying occurrences, and many books and newspaper articles have been written detailing the haunting in Kaimuki House. Story 3 Vault Door. A boy who got a summer job working in a cemetery. It was not the type of work he would normally choose, but his dad was friends with the undertaker and had convinced him to take the job, despite his fear of dead bodies. It was a very eerie place to work, and after being there for over a week, the boy still got the creeps when he caught sight of a corpse. Luckily, he didn't have to get anywhere near the dead bodies. His work consisted mainly of digging graves, sweeping, polishing, and cutting grass. His boss, the undertaker, was the one who prepared the dead bodies for burial. The scariest things were the vaults. Families bought these large tombs, and every member of the family who died was placed inside the vault in a coffin. It creeped him out to think about all those bodies lying around inside the dusty chambers and secret rooms. The boy gradually got used to working in the cemetery, and everything went well until one evening. The unthinkable happened. While he was inside one of the vaults, sweeping the floor and polishing the nameplates, a gust of wind blew the vault door shut. He realized, to his horror, that he was trapped in the crypt, surrounded by dead bodies and coffins, with no one to help him. His worst nightmare was coming true. He shouted and hollered, but it was no use. The undertaker's house was too far away, and nobody could hear him. As the hours passed by, the desperate boy realized that he would have to rely on himself, and began trying to think of a way out. There was a small open window, high up above the vault door. Unfortunately, it was much too high to reach. Looking around the tomb, he decided that he could use the coffins. If he stacked them up one on top of the other, they could form a flight of steps. After stacking the coffins up against the door, the boy climbed up them, gingerly, taking care not to tip them over. Just when he thought his plan was working, he stepped on the top coffin, and the wood gave way under his weight. His foot went straight through the coffin lid, and he felt a sudden, sharp pain in his leg. Crying out in agony, he could picture the splintered wood and rusty nails slicing into his skin. The stack of coffins began to wobble, and for one horrifying moment, he thought he was going to lose his balance and tumbled down to the stone floor. Luckily, he managed to grab onto the window and steady himself. He could feel blood trickling down his leg. Despite the pain he was in, the boy pulled himself up and began shaking his leg to free himself from the coffin lid. The stack of coffins tipped over and clattered to the ground. Clinging to the window, the boy pulled with all his might and crawled through the narrow opening. He dropped down on the outside and limped toward the undertaker's house to get help. The undertaker came out and found the poor boy lying on his doorstep, clutching his bleeding leg. He carried the boy to his car and drove him straight to hospital. After the doctor washed off all the blood, he began to examine the boy's wounds. "How did you get these injuries?" asked the doctor. "I got cut by some broken pieces of wood," said the boy. "But these aren't cuts," said the doctor. "They're human bite marks.